Don't forget, you're playing as Akivili. Turning into a mortal and hiding in the crowd is what you do best. Don't worry, just close your eyes and relax your limbs, and you will find your senses in the middle of a gallery of a plethora of colors. Then, you start browsing the changing scenes quickly. You open your eyes and find yourself in Lepismat, where there's no humanity, but a swarm of flat insects crawling at your feet. Your instinct screams at you, telling you that this is the beginning of everything. However, you realize that strange and anachronistic items constantly appear and are calculated into being from the loopholes in the simulated universe. For example, a manuscript copy of the Research of Finality composed by Genius Society member has unfolded automatically before you. You calm down and observe it, knowing that the end of all things is recorded in it. The scribbling writes, Tazzyronth, an eon that ascends amid hatred and loneliness. From the words the finality mutters in their sleep, Tazzyronth's death predetermines their birth. Throughout their whole life, they will be imprisoned in the path of propagation. If you're interested, you can learn about its abnormality, its separation, and how it is played by fate. This page of the manuscript starts burning by itself after you finish reading it. It carries out a strict self-destruction procedure. The next page contains the handwriting that is even more messy. You believe it will burn after you read it too. Review those geniuses' manuscripts. It's not like research reports can just jump up and hit you, unless, of course, you secretly want them to. A genius left behind a manuscript before being murdered by Polka Kakamond. His writing style is as vague as his speech. An Omen Vanguard successfully interpreted the soliloquy of the finality. Those words sounding like an enigma being played backwards. He then traveled around only to share his findings with others. There are no means to find out whether the Omen Vanguard's action was effective. That darn fictitious pill, it claimed to be able to cure stuttering disorder caused by lack of self-confidence. Now, even my writing is affected. When you look up, you find yourself on an isolated island with coconut trees and ocean currents. The inhabitants are dressed in animal hide in the most primitive form. Forced to live in isolation, it suddenly occurs to you that it is the place of destiny. The first world the propagation descended upon after their ascension seemed to be predetermined. Several Amber eras ago, this place was gradually isolated due to geographic and ocean current changes. Loneliness thickens, mixes, and stirs, and the island is like a handful of soil waiting to be sown. You have nothing to do, and there is only an odd-looking flame on the wasteland before you. You put out the colorful flame with seawater, and a rather charred photo frame emerges. There's a drowned knife next to it. Speak with the photo frame. This is something you often do. Does everyone have that many friends? There is something peculiar about this photograph that chimes an irresistible fear within you. As you gaze upon it, you detect how fate expresses itself. The Mandolin Islanders draw on photos, creating colorful wings upon the image of their family members' shoulders. That multicolored flame erupting out is the representation of life itself. They connect and embrace each other with flames, culminating in the birth of new life. The Mandolin Islanders use the continuation of life to resist the fear of loneliness and death. There is nothing else on this isolated island except love and loneliness. Regrettably, this flame will eventually be extinguished, and the island will end up being the initial breeding ground for the swarm. On planet Zeus Tatera, where the distinction between day and night has long been blurred by the all-encompassing darkness wrought by the swarm, the residents have already resigned themselves to their doomed fate. However, the shroud of darkness suddenly lifts, and the light of dawn breaks through. A triumphant and exultant celebration ensues, lasting for 3 full natural days and nights. You join in on the revelry halfway through, imbibing to your heart's content with the jubilant crowd for 18 days and nights, until a realization dawns upon you. The daylight has persisted for far too long. Your gaze falls upon a stone cabinet at the center of the ruins. Some stubborn souls are still clinging to the past. Give it a knock. You're still waiting for him to come out of the stone closet. You politely knock on it and wait there for 11 whole natural months. In the end, you lose your patience and pull a naked man out of the cabinet, shouting, "Stop hiding! The swarm is no more." At that moment, a heart-rending wail erupts from this miner from the support team, who then clings to the stone cabinet and cries for 3 days and nights. His grief is so profound that he and the cabinet seem like a pair of bitter lovers forced apart. You are no stranger to the sudden darkness that envelops you, for you have experienced too many inexplicable things time and time again. This time, 3 shadows appear before you. Those who have once lived and perished may occasionally appear here. Their features flicker and waver, at times taking the form of insects resembling Melish's adopted sons. Perhaps they possess different souls. A certain traveler with an active imagination murmurs to himself behind the glass wall after being confined. You try to enter his mind. I have seen wonders beyond the scope of human imagination. I have seen dozens of insects intertwine and give birth to entirely new offspring, which in turn weave themselves together like a shape-shifting rose with countless interlocking petals. The reproductive cycle of the swarm is akin to a flower, emitting pheromones in various scents, a breathtaking combination of monstrosity and beauty. Understanding someone else's thoughts is never an easy task. You are starting to get drowsy. At the hospital on Mandolin Island, your ears are filled with raucous cries. The number of newborns has peaked at an all-time high. In the days that follow, they rushed out of the isolated island, and as a result, swarms emerge in the skies all over Lopoli Major. You hold out with the doctors at the hospital for 21 days until the Lopoli Major government officially announces the planet's fall and requests interstellar rescue. As transport ships arrive to evacuate the first batch of survivors, you hear whispers among some of the refugees, urging a distraught woman to flee the area. She refuses to open the door, and her window lies shattered. Driven by a sudden urge, you leap through the broken window and give her a good grimace. For her, this will be a better solace than those fools' comforting words. She is startled by your bold move. For a moment, you're unsure who is the madder one between you and the woman. Satisfied, you glance around the room and spot the toddler shoes scattered on the floor, a heartbreaking revelation of the woman's cruel fate. Tell her about the fate that she must accept. Her children have all left, which also means they will never return. She winces, as if her blood has stopped flowing through her veins. Then, she asks you to leave. Later, on the 24th night of the swarm invasion, she discovers an insect crawling through a slit in her window and raises it as her own child. She teaches it to walk, to put on shoes, and even to speak with all her heart. 7 days later, her house becomes flooded with her new offspring, although none of them can put on shoes for themselves. The calamity has ultimately ceased, or at least one must believe so. Ahead lies only those tending to the psychological needs of survivors, their ashen visages not unlike the ruins of their forlorn city, now deprived of its former glory in the wake of the apocalypse. Sitting beside the 14th Emperor and helping him equivocate and embellish, narration itself is just a fancy sensory trick. Making up stories is your forte. As the 14th Emperor gazes skyward, watching the swarm retreat, he implores you to document the phenomenon. Inventing 12 distinct explanations for the ebbing swarm, you fabricate 12 different versions of prophecies in response to this omen. In the years that follow, the prophecies you created become popular among the trendy ptarmigans, who use them as the means to divine their character and destiny, masking their unease about the capricious future. You have become a master astrologer without effort. The scent of blood pierces your nostrils, jolting you awake. You find yourself amidst an unprecedented massacre and the onset of all that was to follow. If only everything could halt at this instant, but regrettably, no one can freeze the passage of time. You caress the Eliticnan army insignia affixed to your chest. Your regiment has just erupted into conflict with bounty hunters. And yes, you know well that you are on Lepismet, for where else would you be surrounded by countless sandworms? You discern that certain insects are being utilized by the army as weapons due to their self-replication features. Some insects are reproducing on the battlefield, like a legion that regenerates infinitely, while some colossal insects are purging the surface of all hostile entities. I will put down my gun. This is not what I want to do. You think you can stay out of this? Think again. You must learn to defend yourself, both on the battlefield and in your life. A vast swarm of locusts is once again pursuing you. Their buzzing wings produce such a cacophony that it causes you a headache. You slam the door and barricade them outside. You must find some solace. So you take out your treasured pocket watch and tenderly fondle it to stimulate your senses. In the eyes of others, you appear to be fondling and indulging in your pocket watch. But you alone know that the distress record's frequencies have been inscribed as Morse code and are noted via the minute movements in the watch hands. You believe that once you survive this catastrophe, this piece of scrap metal will become priceless, and you shall become the second Louis Fleming. Break it. Others' pain shall never become my solace. Sadly, no matter how many credits you offer, the swarm outside shows no sign of ebbing. You hear a loud crash as the barricade gives way. Now you have to face the brutal reality. The swarm recedes, and you return to Lapoli Major, only to find it strewn with dead branches and bite marks everywhere. Evidence of swarm devastation. Suddenly, you notice a wooden hut that is familiar to you. You recall seeing it once, a long, long time ago, when its windows were obscured by snow and its wooden shingles exuded the scent of pine nuts. 87 tiny garments and over 7,000 pairs of little shoes. They are familiar to you, but you fail to recollect where you saw them before. Before entering, take off your shoes. The ones on your feet are different. Try to refrain from smelling them. Your manners exude politeness, but manners absent of scent cannot be considered quite so splendid. You gaze at the ashes in the furnace, and they seem to speak of Melchizedek's past. She had been waiting for her children until her food had been depleted and everything outside had been devastated. She stumbled, opened the door, and cast herself into the darkness that enveloped the sky.